Shabbat Shalom. Parashat Shemot, our weekly Torah portion, connects us to major parts throughout the Bible. This parasha brings us back to the beginning, to Genesis, and it also connects us with the giving of the Torah, the prophets, and even the New Testament. The parasha begins with the following concept. But the Israelites were exceedingly fruitful. They multiplied greatly, increased in numbers, and became so numerous that the land was filled with them. This verse should remind us of Genesis, but also in contrast to the beginning, where God brings order to chaos. In Exodus, Pharaoh rearranges the social structure of his world and brings a demographic chaos to Egypt. Pharaoh gives this order to his people. Every Hebrew boy that is born you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live. Why does Pharaoh command this terrible commandment? Does he know with royal intuition that a royal successor and redeemer of the people was born? Did Pharaoh want to kill the same redeemer that Herod did when he followed Yeshua's star to Bethlehem? In Genesis, it is the woman that violates the commandment. Also in Exodus, the women, actually 5 women, Yocheved, Miriam, Shiphrah, and Puah, the midwives, and Pharaoh's daughter, violate an explicit commandment. By contrary to what occurred in Genesis, these women bring life. In chapter 3 of our Torah portion, there is a long and detailed description of a special event. After Moses drew near to find out why the bush does not burn up, Moses heard God call out to him. God presented himself as God of his fathers and informed him that he is about to free the children of Israel from slavery in Egypt and bring them to the promised land. It turns out that God imposes on Moses a major role in the task of liberating the enslaved people, the people of Israel. So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But in a very interesting and very human way, Moses refuses to accept the calling 5 times. And every time he makes another excuse to explain why he is not the right person for the task. I'm sure that Moses had mixed feelings. On the one hand, we saw that Moses identified with the people of Israel so much that he risked rescuing one of them. And if he could, I'm sure that he would be happy to continue and help. On the other hand, he escaped from Egypt under the threat of capital punishment. And now he has a family, a job, and a whole other life. Moses' excuses are as follows. We can find them in Exodus chapter 3, verses 11 through chapter 4, verse 13. Excuse number 1, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Excuse number 2, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, what is his name? Then what should I tell them? Excuse number 3, what if they do not believe me or listen to me and say the Lord did not appear to you? Excuse number 4, pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. Excuse number 5, pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else. For every argument, question, and demand, God answers patiently until the last excuse. Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses. How is the 5th excuse different from the other excuses? And what can we learn from this today? God asks Moses to take upon himself a very practical role with very faithful consequences to bring an entire people from slavery to freedom, to bring the people out from the mighty Egyptian empire. In order to succeed in this, he will not only have to convince Pharaoh to release people who had worked there for hundreds of years, but to convince the people that they are able to go out to freedom. From a human perspective, this is an impossible task. Therefore, Moses' first responses were justified, if not necessary. To convince the people of Israel, Moses had to know the answers to questions 2 and 3. In order to succeed in the house of Pharaoh, Moses had to remove the doubts that he had about his own ability and his own talent. And for this came questions 1 and 4. God responded to this and provided them with answers that are actually the tools needed for the task. But in response to Moses' last excuse, please send someone else, God got angry. Why? Because it's likely that Moses is saying here that if he cannot complete the task of bringing the children of Israel into the promised land, it's better not to start at all. It's all or nothing. So the Lord's anger burned against Moses. There is a saying from Pirkei Avot that teaches us, it is not your responsibility to finish the work, but neither you are free to desist from it. This sentence teaches us that when there is an opportunity to get up and do something, it is permissible to check whether we have the proper tools to carry out the task. And if so, to get up and do as much as possible. And if needed, to rely on others to aid and continue the work. I believe that this is the meaning of our calling as believers, to see how and what I can do for the kingdom of God, for the sake of the gospel. We're all workers of God, and we must build the body of Messiah in the kingdom. And there's so much work that Yeshua even asked us to pray for more workers, because the time is short and the work is great, as it says in Matthew chapter 9. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of harvest, therefore, to send out workers into the harvest field. We have to get started, regardless of whether we will be the ones who finish or if we will have to hand off the work to others to finish. We must plant the seeds, and one day God will send someone else to harvest. Who are the workers of God who contribute to the creation and construction of the body of Messiah? The answer must be all of us together. Shabbat Shalom.